Welcome to AAPBS Peregrine Fall Webinar Series. We had successful summer webinar series. I know some of you participated summer, some of you haven't, and this will be your first time. And based on the feedback from the participants from the previous sessions, we've selected topics that participants want us to discuss further. So here's our first session. The topic is Foundation of Assurance Learning, the quality assurance through the learning outcomes, so-called AOL. So without hesitation, let me introduce our speaker, Alima Jamiansurin, who is Director of Asia Pacific Operations at Peregrine Global Services located in Tokyo. Alima.
Great, thank you, Kayla, for the nice introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending where you are joining us today. And I'm delighted to welcome you to our fall webinar series upon the successful completion of the summer offerings, as Kayla mentioned. And I'm really glad that you are able to join us in today's workshop. So this is Kayla and myself, my esteemed colleague. We are delighted again to hold this webinar today on foundations of assurance of learning, right? And this is again based on your feedback and on your input in terms of what you wanted to explore more as when it comes to quality assurance. So again, my name is Alima, and I'm based in Tokyo. I'm Director of Asia Pacific Operations of Peregrine Global and have been a global higher education consultant for more than 10 years. And Peregrine Global is an organization based out of the US that is committed to developing values-based leaders and impacting the quality of education around the world. So we offer higher education solutions related to learning assessment and online learning. We offer higher education consulting solutions, along with the leadership and professional development workshops like here and seminars delivered typically in person, but in this day and age, we have a lot of online offerings and also hybrid solutions as well. So we plan to make it an interactive kind of workshop. It is scheduled for 2 hours, so we'll plan to take maybe a break in between. You let us know based on your feel how it's going, and so we'll see if we need to have a short break in between. But we've got a lot of fun and great stuff planned for you. And as you can see, there are a couple ways for you to participate. I have a few poll questions, so when they're presented, please respond to them. If you have a question, feel free to type it into the question pane or raise your hand and ask it if it needs immediate attention. Or you can save your questions for later, where I plan to leave some Q&A time. And if we don't get to answer your questions, or if you don't get to ask your question yet, or maybe you need to process a little more, feel free to follow up with us and contact us through email. There's also a little gift as a token of appreciation for you to come and joining us and spending time with us. And that would be in the form of a free AOL workbook we have, and also online assurance of learning module that we have. All right. So with that, I would like to start with a bit of inspiration. And this is one of my favorite quotes by Nelson Mandela, right? Education is the most powerful weapon we can choose to change the world. How true is that, right? Mandela understood that changing the world in a positive way could be achieved through education. But more importantly, education that develops and encourages the use of critical thinking at its cornerstone will help the world to minimize the risk of falling into ignorance, right? So as educators, I believe that we play a crucial role in improving the world we live in. And we do that by continually reflecting on and improving quality of education we offer to our students, improving the educational experiences for our learners, who will at the end bring on positive change in the world we live in. And myself, as I mentioned, not only am I a higher education consultant, I've been in higher education on different sides of the aisle, on the university side and on the organizations such as Peregrine Global Services. I have taught, and I'm currently teaching a postgraduate leadership course in a business school. So, so rightly so, we are going to talk about quality assurance for learning outcomes, right? And when we look at the title of the workshop, it really is about looking at what we are doing at our institutions to improve quality, and then quality through the notion of learning outcomes. So how can we use learning outcomes as a tool to improve quality? And when we talk about assurance of learning, of course, we are referring to how to demonstrate through assessment processes that students achieve learning expectations for the programs in which they participate. Now, development, measurement, and analysis of learning outcomes is integral into providing quality business programs at all of our institutions. I have a video, but it might take up a little too much of a bandwidth. So let's go to the next one. So then why our learning outcomes are important, right? We have made a promise to our students that when they complete their business program, they will have acquired certain knowledge, competencies, and skills, which they can apply to their work environments. Now, the question is, how do we know we are delivering on those promises to our students? And how do we ensure that we continue delivering on those promises, right? So the answer is by essentially setting effective and measurable learning objectives and measuring them. Learning outcomes are important because they help us measure what we expect students to know and be able to do once they have completed their studies. Also, they help to ensure that a process of continuous improvement is in place, not just as a once in a while kind of event that has to be done to satisfy an accreditation standard, but it's part of the culture, right, of your organization. And for all of our stakeholders, including students, including our partners and our different organizations, it is strategic and vital that schools remain transparent and accountable. And finally, learning outcomes, if done well, enable schools to close the loop, right? So I generally don't like to use this idiomatic phrase, but this one constantly shows up when talking about accreditation, quality assurance, and talking about learning outcomes, right? So we might as well embrace it and incorporate it. Now, simply put, it means that after a process of evaluation and analysis, changes are made to academic programs to help improve any areas that are not meeting your stated learning outcomes. Now, from there, the process begins again, and you are able to determine if the changes that were made actually did make a difference in the new results. So then traveling through a process from the beginning till the end and continuing with it, you will be able to close the loop. So measuring student learning objectives is not the end goal then, right? Most importantly, we are constantly surveying, collecting data, and analyzing the student learning results. But at the end of the day, the end goal is to ensure that we are continually improving our academic programs. So of course, there's a great nexus between quality and accreditation. In addition to learning outcomes, in addition to, of course, being a requirement by major international accreditors, including, as they are listed here, it is also in the interest of your program to bring up the quality of your offerings. Peregrine Global works with all major international accrediting agencies for institutional programmatic accreditation. And almost all of the accreditors, as you can see on this slide, require you to have identified and defined your learning objectives within the established framework of quality assurance processes, and that involve direct measurement or indirect, or sometimes both, indirect measure of learning resulting in your programmatic evaluation. So imagine some of you might be working with the AACSB, some of you might be working with AMBA or EFMD, or maybe IACB, or any of it could be your national accreditation agency. And as I mentioned, most of them do have a component on measuring student learning. So for example, AACSB in its 2020 newly approved standard, Standard 5, they have a whole section devoted to assurance of learning. And then there it states that the school uses, so there it states, the school uses well-documented assurance of learning processes that include direct and indirect measures for ensuring the quality of all degree programs that are deemed in scope for accreditation purposes. And then the next sentence, as I've just discussed, the results of the school's assurance of learning work should lead to curricular and process improvements. So again, AACSB is stating it out that it's not just enough to conduct assessment, but you want to be able to use the data and the results for your academic decision-making processes. And if AACBSB is the accrediting agency you are working with, then you might be familiar with their standard for student learning assessment requirement. And there, it essentially asks the schools, well, it says the business unit must have a systematic student learning outcomes assessment process and plan that leads to continuous improvement. So very similar notion, right? But then here, the difference with AACBSB, again, we work very closely with all of the major programmatic business and international accreditors. And then in the case of AACBSB, they ask not only for direct and indirect measures, but also they ask for external benchmarking, a comparative measure on performance of student learning. So that's kind of a little extra for AACBSB. And then in the case of IACB, another programmatic accreditor based out of the US, they have a very well-defined key learning outcomes. And they incorporate critical thinking, teamwork, communication, and leadership, in addition to business knowledge areas, which is also part of the key learning outcomes. We also work closely with AMBA, and here's AMBA's learning outcomes requirement, which also includes both fundamental business knowledge and workplace readiness skills, which is soft skills. So here I would like to ask my first poll question. And if you could let me know if your institution has a continuous improvement process. You can select multiple answers if that's what your case is. So you might have well-established continuous improvement process in place already. And or you have some parts of the process in place, maybe working on improving the others. Or you could be in a process of creating, assurance of learning or assessment process in place. Or maybe you may not have a formal, evaluation process for, conducting assessment or reviewing data and results and incorporating it into your academic evaluation. So as I see the responses coming in, so far, I'm really happy to see that no one has picked the last response, which is you don't have any formal process. So I'm really happy to learn that. And then the response is coming as part of, you do have a continuous improvement process in place, but 60% of you are saying you have parts of it. So I can, I wanted to get a really good percentage of the respondents back, but I'll end it now for the sake of saving time. So as you can see, so this is really good results. I'm happy to see that you do have some continuous improvement process, parts and bits in place. And if you wanted to improve upon it, or if you make it into a more holistic or more complete process, welcome, you have come to the right place. Thank you for responding to that whole question. And then so we have talked about how assessment of student learning is fundamental to the assurance of learning process. and most often is part of the quality assurance and accreditation requirements, right? Now then the question remains, how can we meet these requirements? To measure retained learning, ensure continuous improvement, provide transparency and accountability, and close the loop. So how do we do that? And there are many approaches to establishing a process. For example, Mr. Edwards Deming and the PDCA is a great place to start. And most of you are probably familiar with the Deming's approach to quality. And then you can see the circle or loop here, right? And I'm sure you are, again, familiar with the use of it in the business and industry in one form and another, because it has been around for decades to help improve quality. So what we did is we took this Deming cycle approach and adapted it to higher education and for continuous improvement of student learning. So I find it provides a pretty nice systematic way to review the importance of making the most out of learning outcomes assessment data for better decision making. And let's go through the different steps of Deming cycle, and then start with with the planning, action, study, act, and at the end coming to closing the loop. So one of the most important parts of this cycle is to establish clear learning outcomes on the program level, which are not to be confused with the learning outcomes on a course level, right? Or the module level, depending what you call individual classes. We need to determine what it is we want students to know and be able to do upon completion of their entire academic program. So creating learning outcomes, one of the tools we like to use is the Bloom's taxonomy of learning, right? And I'm sure you are quite familiar with it. And the Bloom's taxonomy of learning provides us a list of action verbs based on each level of understanding and learning, right? This list assists us in creating learning objectives that are descriptive, academic level appropriate, but most importantly, provides these verbs we can use in defining measurable and effective objectives. So often when we look at learning outcomes, they are sometimes written in a vague way, right? And in a vague way, which makes it very hard to measure. We cannot simply say that, in a learning outcome, students will understand marketing. So what does that mean to understand specifically? It is not quite appropriate to use the word understanding in creating a learning objective because it's too vague. However, we can measure if students are able to summarize, infer, compare, or interpret concepts, right? The left-hand side, as you know, the left-hand side list might be okay for a general description for something that does not need to be measured. However, it is the right-hand side list that we want to actively employ. And with the help of these action verbs, we are able to create measurable and effective learning objectives. So one thing I wanted to add is when you are, of course, identifying and defining your learning outcomes, I'm sure you are working with your mission and vision of your institution to start with. And then the institutional mission, vision, and goals trickle down and are in alignment with your college or school's goals, and that kind of comes down to your program, right? So all of your learning outcomes should link back to your programmatic strategic learning goals. And the program goals are usually linked to the university institution-wide goals, mission, and vision, and so on. So learning outcomes are based on your programmatic goals because we are talking about overall program evaluation and assessment in this case. So here's an example of a intended student learning outcomes by a degree level. As we move up the degree level, we are moving up to the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy, if you notice with the birds. And we are using higher levels of competencies, again, as we move up to from the bachelor's to the postgraduate master's degree in this case, right? So here is an example of a school that has 8 intended student learning outcomes, and they incorporate core business knowledge areas, for example, as in shown number 4 over there. And if the bachelor's learning objective is written as apply major concepts within the traditional areas of business, for the master's level, we'll move up to being able to demonstrate knowledge of business concepts and functions in an integrated manner. Whereas for the doctoral program, we'll move up to the more advanced knowledge and competencies in a major field of study of business, right? So kind of similarly, you can look at critical thinking and look at the verbs and how it's formulated. So we start with the demonstrating an ability to obtain and process information in order to make decisions and solve problems, to the postgraduate master's level, where we are talking about integrating theory and practice, right? Whereas at the doctoral level, we are looking at integrating divergent or contradictory perspectives or ideas forward. So I thought this would be a nice way to illustrate the way learning outcomes have been formulated using the Bloom's taxonomy concept and the hierarchy. Now, the next stage is how to identify your objectives, your benchmarks, and how you will put in place the assessments or the assessment instruments to measure them, right? These usually go together, since the tools you use to assess will often dictate the objectives and benchmarks you have chosen. So having successfully created your learning outcomes, you want to define your objectives for each of the learning outcomes. So here's another example, NBA learning outcomes plan that has each of the learning objectives or learning outcomes in this place, right? Intended student learning outcomes along with corresponding objectives. So for example, again, if we look at that business core, this is an MBA program. So business core, it says they have 10 disciplines included, which we call topics in Peruvian world. And then the intended student learning outcome is stated as demonstrate knowledge of business concepts and functions in an integrated manner, right? Now the objective to go with it could be 80% of graduates will receive a score of 70% or better on each of the 10 core business competencies on the end of program comprehensive assessment, right? So that's measurable, that's concrete, that's effective. So that's pretty clear. Now, if we look at the example of, well, let's look at the first learning outcome, critical thinking. And the critical thinking intended student learning outcomes for this particular MBA program states that integrate theory and practice in the process of complex problem solving. Now, the corresponding objective states 80% of graduates will receive a score of 3.5 or better on a 360-degree evaluation of their critical thinking skills. So, here's a good example of a school that actually we have worked with, and this is their actual learning outcomes plan, and this is an AACSB accredited program. And they gave us permission to use it, by the way. So now that we have created these learning outcomes, right, and the corresponding objectives, we need to come up with the ways to measure them. And so what we know is that the assessment tools used to measure learning outcomes need to be, as best as possible, objective, comprehensive, and to have results that can be measured. Now, there's a challenge, right, for the schools to identify efficient, economic, financial viable, and effective processes to conduct these kinds of assessments. And then, so if we look at our Deming cycles, so at this point of the cycle, we are looking at, we have identified the outcomes, identified objectives, and selected an instrument or assessment instrument or process to measure those learning outcomes. So we need to actually conduct the assessment, collect the data, and move to the data analysis stage. So here's my next question, poll question I'd like to ask you. And here, if you could answer and let me know, do you objectively measure your learning outcomes? The first response could be yes, all learning outcomes are objectively measured. Excellent. You have some of the learning outcomes that have assessment instruments. Maybe others are out there not quite being assessed yet. Or the third option would be, no, you are not in the process of being able to measure your learning outcomes. And I like my group today. You guys are rocking it. So a quarter of you, oh, it just went down. But so, well, I want to see a good percentage of you to respond. And then, okay, here's the response. So 20% of you are in a good shape. You are able to, have your learning outcomes and measure it objectively. Excellent, good job. And then 80% of you are in that, group where, yeah, some of them are being measured, some could use some improvement. So again, you have come to the right place, and I hope you can walk away with some great ideas and best practices and or solutions to make improvements to improve this current situation. Thank you to responding to my poll question. I'm just checking if there are any questions in the chat. Okay, wonderful. So I have listed that example, right? And in my example, a number of assessment tools had been used or could be used, right, in an objective way to measure your learning outcomes. Here's another list. So as you know, and especially those of you who have 20%, I'm sure you are employing a number of different tools. So one example is end of program comprehensive assessment, right? 360-degree competency evaluation. You could use senior thesis or dissertation or presentations. You could have some embedded assessments and course modules that are looking at an overall program level evaluation. You could have internships or apprenticeships, and then maybe there's a final project, presentation, or report that comes out of that experiential experience. And there's also business simulations that are quite, popular these days. So sort of to look at a bigger picture, right? There are two types of assessments, formative and summative. And we all do really well formative assessments because these are course level evaluations, which are integral part of our learning process, right? And the formative assessment results are used to evaluate and also improve student learning. We can enhance students' intrinsic motivation, their desire to learn using, formative assessments. But at the end of the day, the formative assessment results contribute to improvement in our teaching as well. Now, program level assessment is the part that, helps us to look overall at where we are with our entire, academic curriculum, right? This summative assessment occurs at the end of the student's learning process. It's used for accountability of the academic program to improve learning, right? And it's done most often as a pre and a post test in order to demonstrate value added. And a lot of the times, it's great to get some, at the end of the program, performance information on student learning, right? But you want to know where those students started. And I'm assuming that most often your student demographics do not change, right? So for example, say on the outbound or the end of the program performance evaluation on direct measure of student learning, your students scored 80%, right? Wonderful. But what if when they were coming into the program, their inbound assessment results were at 60%. Okay, there's still value added from 60%, they went to 80%. But what if you consider the next scenario where your students came in at 30%? So the value added is going to be quite different, right? The story of your academic program, the value you bring into your students' knowledge base is a totally different story from starting 30% versus 50%. And that kind of, story or value added information you can share with your, for your recruitment, for your marketing, in your discussions with stakeholders, investors, or financial partners, and so forth. So it makes a big difference where you started story with where you ended. So the summative measures, of course, they are provide us with data information for integrated knowledge, for student retained knowledge that they have achieved by completing your academic programs. So we also talked about, and I'm sure you employ both, about direct measures and indirect measures of learning, right? So program level direct measures are used to measure retained knowledge and skills students are expected to have acquired at the end of their program of study. Now, of course, the program level learning outcomes are written to capture expected results of student retained knowledge. And then you can do the direct measure of learning by utilizing a comprehensive assessment tool that could be either embedded as an assessment into a course or a standalone exam. So here we want to measure directly what the student knows, right? We are, engaging, and we have our students demonstrate to us what they know. So you are going to use, of course, direct measurement results to support your continuous improvement processes. Now, indirect measures provide a view of student learning, for example, attitudes, perceptions, or feelings. They employ, they essentially collect measurement of students' feelings about what they learn, right? And you utilize self-reported data in the form of student surveys or satisfaction surveys. And then essentially indirect measures help to substantiate instances of student learning. So I'm sure you have your exit surveys, end of school term surveys, and interviews, there are course evaluations. And then you can even get some reports on retention, graduation, placement to get an indirect measure of learning, right? Again, you use the indirect measures in conjunction with direct measures of student learning in order to drive your continuous improvement processes. And a lot of the times, especially when I work with accreditors, we're going into different countries and different working with the schools outside of the US on their initial accreditation. And I get asked this question quite a bit, which is why final grades could not be used for summative assessment of student learning. So why final grades are not program assessment, right? So here I have an example. It's a marketing course, and there are 2 students enrolled in this course. And both students got the exact same final grade, 81, which is very good. And however, we can see from the grade breakout that final grades incorporate, they actually, incorporate a number of different items, right? There's exam 50%, there's a group presentation, there's a paper, and also there's a class participation. So final presentation, group presentation looks like is used as part of the final grade. And but then it takes into account, usually presentation takes into account things like, presentation style and delivery, but those items are not related to the actual learning, right? And then you can see that that 81%, the participation is again, not related to students' actual learning. So, and that's the reason, you cannot use final grade as part of a programmatic evaluation. Now here's a table that shows you course level assessment and the program level assessment and how they are doing quite different things. For a course level assessment, everyone enrolled in the course is going to be, assessed. So 100% of the students is a sample. And the measures are indirect measures, such as through assignments, final grade, or participation, or timely submission of homework and assignments. And then in terms of who determines the assessment content, it's the faculty. It's driven by faculty. And faculty decides what is the standard for your particular course's performance. And the results are reviewed by the instructor. And I'm teaching now the leadership course for the MBA students. So I'm deciding which textbook to use, what is my test bank questions, and what is my rubrics and so forth. And then if I get feedback, I'm using the feedback to improve student performance in my class only, right? Whereas for program level assessment, we are looking at the entire curriculum of the business school, of the, if you have an economics department or management department, that's what you're looking at. And then in terms of sample, maybe anywhere from 20 to 25% of the students enrolled in your program may get tested in the end of the program evaluation. We are using direct measure of learning to evaluate your program and performance of the students vis-a-vis their learning. And then the assessor does not have to be the faculty, right? Anyone who's not the student can conduct it, or sometimes it's an online platform, it's automatically streamlined process. In terms of who actually gets the determine the content, it's from your curriculum committee, it's from faculty. You have a performance standard set for the entire academic program, department, or school. And then the results are going to be, the performance results are going to be reviewed by either curriculum committee or assessment committee or faculty, and you are going to implement a range of changes to make improvements into your curriculum, right, into your program, in order to improve student performance in the entire academic program and department. So these are the differences. I know, I'm sure you have these pretty well established at your own programs. Now, this brings us to the last two steps of the cycle, and that is sharing the results and making changes. So a nice segue from the previous table. And then this is, as we've just discussed, this is better known as closing the loop, right? So our objective here is to take all of the work we have put into this process and use it to uncover our strengths and weaknesses, right? And decide if we want to address them, and if so, how. So as you recall, the objective is, of course, to have data that enables the accreditation and the quality assurance team to help understand to what degree students are meeting your learning outcomes. So here I have a simple bar graph from Peregrine's Global Assessment Exam. And then it provides a benchmark with 5 of the topics that are under evaluation. So this is performance of a, well, we call this called Peregrine Academic Services. And then the topic or the business competency area is business ethics. And then, so this is, within this program, how students have performed on each of the different components relative to the average of all the end of the program exam takers. And then we're talking about, collecting the data, right? Reviewing the results, and then identifying the areas of strengths and the areas of weakness. And as you are familiar with working with your quality assurance agencies, there's no result that is a bad result, right? There's no performance that is a bad performance. It's more importantly to understand and to get data that you can use to identify the areas of, again, improvements, right? So if you review the results, and then if you identify certain areas where you would like to improve upon the results, and then you want to make it change, right? So here's a kind of quick table that gives some of the examples of what possible changes might look like and take place. And it's quite important to kind of put this all together and then have some also deadline attached to it. So let's say you have reviewed certain data and results and identified the areas that need to change or improve. So first example here says improve accounting results. And then what kind of action do you need and what is the deadline for that action to kind of be completed? So there, the description says review accounting course with Professor Jones to identify enhancements, review with Professor Smith, study workshop exercises and accounting, and then let's have a timeline to get it done within this academic year. But it's very important to also lay out what kind of outcomes would you like to achieve with this intended change. Improve score to surpass 60%, I assume, within 2 years of implementing this particular change. So this is a pretty good action plan you can use as part of your continuous improvement process. As I mentioned, as a token of our appreciation for joining us in today's webinar, and I would like to thank you and provide you free access to our Assurance of Learning workbook. And it's a digital copy, so I'll be happy to send you the link and you can download it and share with anyone on your teams. Also, I'll be happy to provide you free access to our Assurance of Learning module. So this is a leading edge online learning module that you can work through yourself or with your team. It's pretty interactive, and then really get some of the workbook, exercises and templates in one place. And so this is a good stuff. I'd be happy to send you access. You let me know if you would like to receive that. So I'd like to take a little time to see if there are any questions right now. And if we're doing okay with pace, it's not too much overload, and I hope it was helpful overview. Feel free to kind of give me your feedback. And all right. So I think we seem to be quite okay so far. Then let's move on to, so what kind of solutions out there to help you with putting together this whole continuous improvement process in place, right? And from Peregrine, we have several solutions that could help you to make your assessment processes and implementation of it more effective, more streamlined, automated, efficient, and quite importantly for all of us, right? Financially viable, economic in terms of not only finances, but time is, of course, quite precious, right? So if you are able to lessen the load on your faculty, on your administrators with this online streamlined tool, I think that would make your program even more successful. And so these are two of the offerings I would like to share with you. And last summer, we have had separate sessions on each of them. And we also plan to conduct separate sessions on the value skills and business education assessment tool in the coming weeks. So I believe value skills is going to be in December, and then business assessment, a separate standalone webinar will be in November. So please check, and then I hope you'll join us. But I wanted to kind of give you more of an overview of what these tools could do for you. So we all are quite familiar, of course, with the soft skills, right? Also known as interpersonal skills or workplace readiness skills. These are personal qualities that are important to be successful in the workplace, but also in life, essentially, right? These skills can be taught and developed with experiential learning through your courses, through your internships or hands-on, activities you might have in your program, but they're quite different when it comes to assessing them, right? If anything, it has always been quite challenging to assess workplace readiness skills or soft skills. And so here I would, at the end of the session, I'll talk briefly about the workplace readiness skills or soft skills assessment tool, which we call EvaluSkills. But then let's start now with the business knowledge assessment tool that we offer. We call it Global Business Education Assessment Tool. Also, we refer to it as GBE. So we have talked about, of course, defining learning outcomes, also assigning measurable objectives for each of the learning outcomes, and putting together an assessment plan and continuous improvement process in place, right? And the most important step in the Deming cycle of continuous improvement is to analyze the data, understand the data, and use the results for your continuous improvement work, for your academic decision-making, or perhaps even administrative decision-making as well. So there's no need to spend time, effort, and resources if we do not use the information obtained from the assessment for your decision-making, right? Making improvements in your curriculum and improving on the delivery of your content and knowledge to your students. And there's no point in conducting assessment for the sake of assessment. So, and that's where we come in to really help you and to make the most out of your learning outcomes assessment data. And here, I would like to share how it's done. So what is GBE, right? GBE assessment. It is a customizable program level assessment solution with in-depth reporting and data analysis to help you satisfy your assurance of learning requirements. It's online, it's administered to your students at a time and place of their choosing. Now this solution provides normed summative assessment for academic programs and is used for internal and external programmatic evaluation. GBE is customizable, and you can integrate it into your academic program, management program, business program pretty seamlessly in order to measure students' retained knowledge associated with the program's learning outcomes. We are looking at a program level assessment, but I do want to mention that because the programmatic evaluation is a more challenging part, right? We offer it as such, but you can use it as a course level assessment. But as we've discussed, course level assessment is embedded and most of us are very familiar and we do it really well. So you can use this tool for course level assessment, but let's focus on programmatic evaluation because that's the focus of the today's workshop. And then, so this particular assessment solution is specifically designed to address your programmatic accreditation requirements related to learning outcomes assessment, quality assurance, and external academic benchmarking. And you can use it as an pre and post. So pre would be at the beginning of the academic program. If you have a 4-year program, this would be your freshman. If you have a postgraduate master's level program, this would be your incoming students into your program. And then the outbound exam, which is the program level end of the program post test, we call it outbound exam, is typically administered to the students at the end of the program as the very last activity in the student's academic experience. So we call it that, as I mentioned, inbound and outbound approach, which is same as pre and post testing. We have 7 language options, and then the English test banks are in British English. And then just so you know, I know my organization is based out of the US, but our test banks are not US centric. So we don't have any US centric questions or examples or references. So you're truly taking an assessment that measures students' business and management knowledge areas. And then because this exam is available in German, Spanish, French, Portuguese, Mongolian, and Russian, students are not taking a language proficiency test, right? We're really measuring students' knowledge directly. And that's why we are able to compare results against different regions. And so when you use this assessment tool, you will be able to compare your students' results against all outside of the US-based schools averages of undergraduate programs, maybe postgraduate programs, also regional averages. We have European average, we have Asian average, East Asian average, we have Indian schools average, and so forth. Latin American, and of course, all international, all US programs averages. So you will be able to gauge where your students' performance is relative to the rest of the world, including the US. So here are some of the key features of the Global Business Education Assessment Tool. And then we have built it, of course, the customization flexibility is a big thing, right, for us. And then you can create as many exams as you need to, depending on your particular program's needs. You might have multiple programs within your business school. Maybe there's a management, Master of Science degree. Maybe there's an MBA program. Maybe there's, Master of Science in Accounting. So depending on your particular program, you can create multiple assessment exams, which are aligned to your learning outcomes, right? And you can do that by selecting from the 12 core business and management topics that we made available to you. And I've just mentioned that you can integrate it really easily into your academic program, but also if you have any learning management systems you use at your institution, you can integrate it fully for seamless delivery of the assessment exam to your students, and then automated gradebook posting. Once you sign up to use the assessment tool, you have full access to the client admin site 24/7, which means you will have unlimited access to your individual student results. And most importantly, the ability to generate the wonderful, expansive reports that we offer to you. And as I mentioned, you are able to benchmark your students' scores with other institutions based on regional and demographical characteristics of the institutions. Also, affiliation with accrediting agencies as well. We are building new aggregates all the time. So if you wanted to compare your students' results against, for example, all AAPBS accredited programs, or we work on AACSB, you will be able to do so. And then because we have extensive safety and security features built into the tool, you can offer this exam to your students without a proctor. So students can take this exam. You can use your classroom time, which is quite precious, but we have designed it so you don't have to, right? So your students can take this assessment exam in a library where they can sign in a computer lab, or they can even take it from their home or from their dorm at a time and place of their choosing. So, and this also as an institution brings you some savings, right? Typically, proctoring services in the US and around the world cost anywhere from $20, $40 to, I've seen $199 per student. So that's a neat feature of this tool. So I mentioned that we offer 12 core management or business topics in our database of test bank questions. And here's the list of those 12 core common competency topics, is sometimes also they called as well. So they're pretty, typical of what you will see in your either undergraduate or postgraduate management or business program. So at an undergraduate level, most often you may cover anywhere from 10 or 12 of these areas, because these are the foundations, right, of what a business undergraduate degree means. But then if you don't offer a particular subject matter or topic in this case, then by all means, they're not included in your assessment exam, right? So most often, sometimes I see leadership may or may not be offered at an undergraduate level, or sometimes, again, depending on your program, global dimensions or legal environment of global business and so forth. So that's what we offer, and there are separate undergraduate and graduate test banks in 7 different languages. Number 13 here, it says customized topic, right? So we have our own test bank questions, and the questions, we have thousands of them, and the questions are offered to the students randomly. So that's part of the safety and security feature of the platform, to use it without a proctor. But also, if you have a very unique topic or area of concentration of your program, you can send us your test bank questions, and we can upload it and offer it along with Peregrine's topics, right? So one example would be, we have a Fashion Institute of Technology, which is based in New York City, in New York. And one of the key areas that they have to assess is fashion merchandising. No one else, I think, from our other 550 partner institutions has that kind of test bank topic. So they sent us their own questions. And of course, we go through sort of quality assurance with them, make sure that the questions are quality. And then we offer it along with our Peregrine's topics. So in case of the Indian schools, we have customized topics for schools that are located in India. There's an Indian accounting and finance, and I don't think I have that slide here. But there are also country and regionally specific topics that are available in our database. All right, so I have mentioned a number of times that we offer you expansive reporting capabilities, right? And we have talked about it's not enough to administer the assessment alone. And the most beneficial part of the assessment is, of course, to use the data and the results to gain insight into how your students are learning. How well are you doing on your learning outcomes, right? You want to identify the areas of strength is good too also, but also what are the areas of improvement? And once you identify the gaps, and once you have, of course, good sample, once you have established the trend, once you decide that that is a priority, of course, you can start discussing the way to bridge gaps and remedy these shortcomings, right? So these actionable results produced by our assessment tool helps you to satisfy your accreditation requirements, could be national, international, like our partners we've looked at, address your assurance of learning needs, and help you improve the quality of your education program. So in terms of these Peregrine's reports, we group them into 3 categories: individual student result-based reports, reports for programmatic evaluation, and also supplemental reports. So here, I would like to ask you another question. So this is our third poll. If you could kindly answer this question as to, so my question is, to what degree do you close the loop using learning outcomes data? So you are conducting your assessments, you are collecting performance data on your student learning. Wonderful. And I know 80% of you said could use some improvement, which is, wonderful, helps you to, continuously improve, right? Drive that improvement and progress. But then are you able to use the results and make improvements, make changes? So I see the responses are coming in. And then I see that you're doing a good job, partially doing a pretty good job is now majority. And there is a 20% of you that say you don't have a formal process to kind of go through, review the results and make changes and improvements. I'm glad to see there's no one said not yet in place, but also we have 0 respondents saying yes, very successfully. Thank you for responding to the poll question. And I hope I'll be able to help you with those of you who are, even if you're doing a partially good job, there's room for improvement. But for those of you who responded that you don't have a formal process and you probably need it, let's talk and see how we can bridge that gap, right? Thank you. So as I mentioned, this is the first group of reports, and it's based on individual student results. So as I mentioned, when you sign up to use Peregrine's, any of our assessment tools or online courses and so forth, simulation, strategy simulation games and so forth, you will get full access to all your students' results, right? And then also this, as along with all the other reports. The first report is pretty self-explanatory. This is an Excel file, student by student results, broken down by those 12 topical areas, but also each topic is broken down into what we call its components that are subjects, right? So each topic has anywhere from 4 to 8 subject areas, and the results are broken down by topic and subject. So you are getting very detailed kind of data. And then the metric you're getting here is percent of questions students answered correctly, again, for each topic and subject. And the pairwise report is once your student who have taken, for example, an inbound exam, right, pre-test, they've gone through your program, be it your undergraduate program or a 2-year program, and then they take the post-test, the outbound exam. Then you have an ability to run this pairwise report, which otherwise could be viewed as individual student progress report. And there's also an executive summary version of that pairwise report available to you. Now, this is where you want to spend the most of your time. The programmatic evaluation reports that are used for your continuous improvement processes, as well as to meet your programmatic accreditors AOL requirements. So the first one is your trend analysis, essentially, right? Your longitudinal analysis report. And if some of the accreditors require you to have certain number of data sets to include in your quality assurance report, or sometimes it's your self-study report. And by that, they want to make sure that you have a process in place, right? You have a assessment plan and process in place where you use the results and use it for driving your continuous improvement work. And then that's why in working with international accreditors or programmatic accreditors, most of your time is going to be taken up to meet that particular requirement. Just assessment, assurance of learning is a big chunk of your accreditation requirement anyways. So with the longitudinal analysis report, you will be able to put the data of up to 4 different exam periods in one report. And you define what that exam period is. Maybe this is annual data. Maybe you graduate students once a year. If you graduate students twice a year, maybe it's that, each graduation assessment is its own period. Maybe you have 3 graduations a year. So it's especially with the schools that graduate once a year, it gets a little more complicated to try to collect that trend analysis, right? So that's what this report is, which is really good tool to see, where the trend is, whether you're on the right trend or whether you're kind of flattening or whether you're going down. So that's a good report to review once you have been using the assessment, GBE assessment tool for a few testing seasons. Now, internal analysis report is where you're going to spend most of your time. And this is where you get that detailed insight into your students' performance broken down by topic, by subject. This is where you can compare your students' results against an external benchmark. And this is where you're going to really get a good understanding of where your strengths are and where your areas of improvement are. And there's an executive summary version of it. And then if you wanted to compare your students' results against external benchmarks, you're going to run the external comparison report. And if you have multiple programs within your business school, for example, as I mentioned, different concentrations, different specializations, Or if you have multiple campuses, right, you might want to run this program comparison report. If you have multiple student cohort groups, maybe you accept adult learners. Maybe you also have a portion of your student population that is coming straight out of undergraduate program and 18 to 22-year range, and you wanted to compare their results against each other. So you can run then program comparison report. The value here is, for example, say you have master's in accounting, right? And then you also have a master's with a marketing emphasis. And when you compare those results against each other, you want to see, are your marketing students performing at a higher level on marketing topics than your accounting students, and vice versa, right? And so this data validates, this data tells you if you are delivering on and doing right by those different specializations. In terms of the supplemental reports, there are some really innovative and some unique reports that we offer to you to really better understand your students' learning, right? Knowledge gaps and so forth. So let's start with, I'll come back to response distractor report, but let's talk about the student survey. We talked about direct measures of learning, right? Which is what the GBE assessment tool is. We are asking questions, students, knowledge-based questions, asking students knowledge-based questions. They're thinking through their, demonstrating to us if they understand the concept, what their knowledge is, and so forth, right? But there's also indirect measure of learning, which you can get from student interviews or surveys. And we offer you a free exit survey, which you can attach to your outbound exams. And there you can, insert a few questions that are related to indirect measure, especially with AACSB, with the 2020 standards. Now they do require to have business programs, both direct and indirect measures of learning, all right? So this is a way with one simple tool to get data on both ends. The student surveys are typically attached to the outbound, the post exams, and they offered before the outbound exam, the post test. And typically we recommend to not have more than 5 to 8 questions in that exit survey, because keep in mind, students are there to take the big assessment exam, and so you don't want to kind of take up their time there. But we do have a summary report of the survey results, and then this survey tool is a really flexible one, right? Because you can have any types of questions in it. We have a sample where you can use as a template to upload your questions, but you can have here multiple choice questions. You can have, true or false, or you can have open-ended questions or Likert scale type of response questions. So it's a cool and nifty tool that I hope will bring some great value to you. There's a grade scale report. There's a whole another talk, and as I mentioned, we'll have another section going into in detail about the assessment tool features, capabilities, and so forth. But there's a whole host of discussions about how to administer the assessment, right? To embed it into a course, to offer it as part of a program, at the end of the program, as part of a course, embedded, not embedded, but then how to motivate students, how to make sure that you're collecting good quality data. And in terms of good quality data, you don't want to sample the cream of the crop. You really want to get representative, good information, actionable information from your student learning performances, right? And then, especially in the US though, unless something is graded, students don't like taking exams. And then one way to motivate students to do better on the exam is to grade it, to include it as part of a course. So it's been more so in the US. Outside of the US, in my experience working with schools, actually our students are happy to take this external assessment of their learning offered by a US-based organization like Peregrine Global. And because we have more than 550 partner institutions, right, higher educational institutions around the world taking this assessment exam, and the students want to see how their school fares against the others. They also want to see how they are as individuals perform on this external evaluation of their learning. So students like to take this exam, if anything, especially in Asia, right? We've had students who, take it seriously, do their best, and the schools get some really good information. So grade scale grading exams incorporating the grade of the assessment exam as part of a final course and so forth has not been an issue. But if that's what you wanted to do, it's available to you. We talked about how you can compare your students' results against a number of different aggregates, right? Averages. So if you wanted to get some statistical information for each of the different aggregates, you will run the aggregate extraction report. So this will provide you, averages for each of the different, the average for the all US undergraduate business programs, or all US master's level, or all international. When I say international, outside of the US, schools average for undergraduate management programs, graduate programs, or regional, European, Latin American, or Asian in our case, East Asian and Indian, and so forth. So you'll be able to get the stats. And then you can also run a client schools aggregate report and see which schools make up each of the different aggregates. So we are in the business of transparency, and we also provide you that transparency. So this is what actually, I do want to mention that our reports have been updated. They have a really fun new look and new data and new graphs, but they're very easy to be generated. We have a report wizard. You can go into the client admin, and it's shown on this little image. You can run the internal analysis report. So we talked about it, and I'll talk a little more when we have the separate webinar on the GBE assessment. So essentially, with the internal analysis report, as I mentioned, this is where you are going to analyze your data and get understanding of your strengths and weaknesses based on your student learning performances, right? And it's most commonly used for, again, to understand the topic level, subject level performance of your students. And so this will provide you with percent of questions answered correctly, and then percentile rankings. And you can also see, what are the different thresholds and set the targets and so forth. So this is a really cool stuff. So for example, in this example, program level learning outcomes are being measured by a comprehensive end of program assessment that covers the fundamental business knowledge areas, right? So this is a representative sample, and let's just assume that students have taken this exam as part of their business strategy course. And then, of course, you can, as I mentioned, integrate it into a course, like in this example, I believe, or you can offer it as a standalone test. And sometimes, like when students graduate, they have a checklist, right? So one of the checklist items could be, take the Peregrine Outbound Comprehensive Assessment exam. And here you can see the results. And if your achievement, let's see, if your performance objective was set at 60%, then it wasn't achieved by the students in, I see, business and economics, a little under, looks like, and or microeconomics and accounting, right? So here you can see, where you performed above and under your set target. Now here the data is broken out, as I mentioned, not only by a topic, so this is business ethics, but also into its components, which sometimes are subtopics. And in this example, subject level data. And then, so this provides you with that, granular level and quite detailed, actionable data. So here, you can share and compare the results. In this example, there is an AACSB average, one of these lines. There's an so outbound and inbound. So it's like, where the floor is, where the ceiling is. And then also accredited AACSB US accredited programs. So you can see where your results fall relative to these other benchmarks. And the blue is your inbound exam result. The orange is your outbound exam result. So you can also see the value added information relative to your benchmarks in this example. And then if you are into external benchmarking, if that's one of the requirements by your accreditor, or as a program you want to see how competitive you are or how your performance fares relative to other institutions, you can run the external comparison report. And up to 5 different aggregates could be chosen and used to compare your results against the school's results within one external comparison report. And of course, you can run this report multiple times to incorporate many other aggregates, more than just 5 aggregates. And I talked about the program and student cohort comparison report and the longitudinal report as well. Oh, so this is the response Distractor report. Okay, so we've been going for an hour and 16 minutes. I just wanted to see if you guys are doing well. If you need a break, I'm good. I have my water and I can go on. Let me know if you needed a break or just in the chat if you do. You guys are amazing. Okay, so we'll go on and let me know if you have any questions and I'll be able to answer them as we go along. All right, so response distractor report. This is quite a unique report, and Peregrine is the only provider of such a report. And so you have, conducted your assessment, and you have reviewed and analyzed the data and the results, right? So you have a good sample, you have a trend established, and you have also, identified the areas of your program's focus. You do cover maybe 10 to 12 of those 4 common management or business topical areas. But then there's some that are, have a higher priority, or some have a more of your specialized focus. And then so you looked at the internal analysis report, you looked at the external comparison, and you really understand why you see what you see. You have looked at if it was accounting, breakout of different accounting topical areas, and then decided, okay, we really need to kind of, improve results for example accounting, just to pick it, right? And then after all of that work, I wanted to run the response distractor report as a last report. And I call it a report that helps you to identify the knowledge gaps. And so what we did here is we have our test bank of questions, right? And then for each of the questions, each question typically has 4 to 5 responses, right? There's 1 correct response and there's 3 to 4 incorrect responses. So each of the responses were coded into what's called response distractor. So when a student answers a question, picks a response, it doesn't matter if it's a correct or wrong. And then that response is coded to one of the 5 types of response distractors, right? So we want to understand if a student answers question incorrectly, we want to understand why, right? What does it tell us? Because we're assuming students, have done that work of thinking through and really critically analyzing and coming up with, even if it's a wrong response, it's a response. So then what we did is for each of those responses, we coded them into one of those 5 types of response distractors, right? And they are, so did a student answer a question incorrectly due to factual-based error, concept-based error, calculation-based error, conclusion-based error, or interpretation-based error, right? So we have it in our test bank. So what we do is we run your data and then look at your sample and compare it to the test bank. So did your students answer questions incorrectly due to, for example, calculation-based error at a higher frequency than the frequency and the test bank, right? And is that difference statistically significant? So if you notice that your students are making picking incorrect responses at a higher frequency, say due to calculation error on accounting, higher than the test bank sample. And you can also compare your results against aggregate pool, right? Compare another average. And then you're like, okay, yeah, our students are making more errors due to calculation error, response distractor, as we call it, for accounting. So then that kind of directs it to the steps of mitigation. For accounting, for example, maybe your students need some refresher course, math for accounting students, right? And then a next round of testing, you can see did the results improve. Another example could be maybe your students are making conclusion-based errors at a higher frequency than the test bank sample or the comparative pool sample. Then the remedy could be, well, conclusion, right? That means your students kind of need to hone up their critical thinking skills, or they need to better understand, the concepts and so forth. So first you look at your curriculum, right? Do you want to include some additional concepts or some additional content area? But most often we only have 16 weeks of classroom time, 8 weeks of classroom time, depending on what kind of semester you have. And then, well, it's set, right? The content is set. Then maybe can you add some activities, right? Group activities, some assignments where students get to have more experience with the, using their critical thinking abilities, with the, digging deeper, maybe doing a little research to improve upon their conclusion-making abilities. So this data tells you not only where the certain knowledge gaps could be, why your students answering questions incorrectly, especially relative to the test bank sample and then the comparative pool, but it helps you to sort of direct you into the paths of mitigation, right? How to improve the delivery of that content to your students, you can get a better learning with your students. So I kind of get excited. I'm an economist by training, so this is a great report and helps you to really get the most out of your assessment data and results. So in summary, in terms of GBE, we are able to provide you with a meaningful, cost-effective, and a practical solution to the evaluation of programmatic learning outcomes, right? Using GBE, you are able to conduct comparisons of your academic program's learning results to one or more external aggregate pools. And you're, of course, able to conduct your internal analysis of the program and able to directly measure students' retained knowledge. And if you use our exit survey, you can get indirect measure of student learning. And then while you're using the data and results for your academic improvement purposes, you can at the same time address your programmatic accreditation requirements. So here's another poll question, and I really appreciate you taking really nice active participation in my survey. So the next question I wanted to ask you is, what topics are you interested in for our future webinar offerings? Oh, I didn't realize I haven't had this, but this is good. So we are talking about, the first is, we want to bring you content that helps you, right? That brings value, that helps you to solve most of your challenges. And today we are talking about, of course, assurance of learning, the foundations of it in a bigger framework, but also with a couple solutions. But there's a whole another host of, learning outcomes planning and, putting an assessment process, continuous improvement process together. And we more than happy to provide you with such assistance. If anything, actually, the consulting I provide for you as part of Peregrine Global Asia Pacific operations is a free of charge. And just so we can help you and bring you value. And so I see a number of you kind of need assistance there. We do have Experiential Learning, which is an online strategy simulation, which is a really cool tool. And I think I have a separate webinar on it and helps with development of critical thinking, strategy, of course, soft skills, and sort of a capstone experience. We'll cover that. So I'm kind of jumping all over. So that's the first. The second is AOL, learning outcomes planning. And then soft skills and career readiness skills development and assessment is another area. And then, of course, assessing and measuring learning, right? And I'll have, as I said, a separate GBE assessment session in November, I believe. So thank you. So interestingly, the responses are still coming in. And let me share. So I see 40% of you want more assistance or more knowledge and more sort of support in learning outcomes planning. 20% interested in soft skills development and assessment of it. And then more want to learn or need assistance with assessment and measuring of student learning. Thank you. It's very helpful for me to understand what your needs are at this point. All right, so that kind of covers the overview, sort of highlights of our global business education assessment tool, which I mentioned will have a separate webinar to really go into ins and outs and more detail about the GBE assessment. So I wanted to also give you, in the time remaining, highlights of the Evaluator skills. And so we have talked about, of course, defining and measuring learning outcomes. And a lot of you have these learning outcomes that are on critical thinking, right? On teamwork, on leadership, on communication, what we call the interpersonal competencies, right? So how does Peregrine help you to mitigate the challenges of assessing these kinds of soft skills and competencies? And we all understand the importance of soft skills, right? And their relevance in the workplace. But evaluating them is a challenge. And especially with our students in today's environment, more and more students are expected to succeed in their workplace straight out of their college experience, right? Straight out of their postgraduate experience. Gone are the days when corporations and companies offered training and sort of, mentorship and guidance to help them to make that transition. That's not there anymore. So as educators, we are expected to help our students to, have learned, acquired, and, worked through these interpersonal and career readiness skills. And that much more, it's difficult to, not only define the soft skills, there's also a lack of common understanding of, standardized measures of those skills. And it's very hard to take personal subjectivity out of assessing soft skills. And there's also, there's a certain level of maturity, of course, needed, but there is reliance on self-awareness. And I bring a certain level of maturity required is, especially at the undergraduate level, there's a whole another area, a subject that we need to bring awareness to and develop our students. And so there are many, many challenges trying to evaluate soft skills, or to develop soft skills, let alone assessing them. So in light of these difficulties, we are proposing a new instrument to evaluate the soft skill proficiencies, right? And we call it Evaluator skills. So many of you are probably familiar with the 360-degree assessments that are used in the industry, right? So with the 360 evaluation, you gather information from a variety of perspectives on a person's relative strengths and weaknesses. So if I'm having a 360-degree evaluation, then my boss, my peers, people I have supervised, respond to this 360-degree evaluation, and then the feedback is collected, and that's my review, right? So what we did is we used this concept and applied it into higher education. So we have created a test bank for what we call assessment items, which are essentially individual soft skill competencies, right? So we have a test bank of those assessment items, soft skills, that you can choose from. And then each skill comes with its own evaluation rubrics. It has objective statements regarding the performance. And then the evaluators, they have this common ground, right? This shared evaluation rubric and rating participants. So participants could be our learners, students. You can also use it not only as part of postgraduate programs are quite perfect. You can also use it as part of your faculty and administrative staff evaluation. So here are some sample learning outcomes, right, that you might have in your program. So for example, graduates will acquire a wide base of managerial knowledge and skills that will allow them to lead themselves and others, think critically, make decisions, maximize resources, operate effectively in cross-cultural settings, analyze complex data, understanding financial implications of managerial decision-making, understand the complexities of business ethics and global environment, and act with integrity, and so forth, right? And so you have those, we all have them. But as mentioned, the goal of Evalu Skills is to provide you with a reliable measurement of your students' performance on these learning outcomes related to workplace competencies, right? And to this end, we provide you with a vast menu of skills to choose from to create your own instruments. And as I mentioned, we have this database of 200 plus assessment items or these skills, right? And they each come with its own evaluation rubric. You can also write or develop your own skills and rubrics, and we can add them to our assessment. But as you can see, we have an extensive database. So with the 200 plus assessment items, I don't think you will need to add anything. But here are some examples, as you can see, of different skills that we have. And we also have sample templates already built in the system. So if you're working with a particular accreditor, then you can select that accreditor's requirements, and then sample template we have created for you that corresponds to that particular accreditor's standard. So how do you create an assessment instrument, right? So in the assessment instrument, creation could be sort of used in analogy with ordering pizza. You can order pre-made pizza, or you can have a customized pizza, right? You might want pineapples, you might want mushrooms, you might want olives. So that's what creating a value skills instrument is like. As I mentioned, the rubrics allow you to measure items that usually feel intangible, right? And then each rubric comes with a statement and a sample behavior that corresponds to a particular scale or level you are rating. And so in this example, we have this 5-point Likert scale rubrics for each scale. There is a sample behavior. What does it mean to be exceptional, right? What does a student need to demonstrate in order for you to rate that student at 5? Or what does it mean to be 2, marginal, right? So the nice thing is, as an evaluator, you will have maybe multiple students that you are evaluating. And then through the platform, maybe you evaluated a student early on, and then maybe a few months later, you have evaluated 3-4 students, and then you really have gotten to know the instrument much better, right? So at that point, you can actually, unless you have closed it down, you can go and review your first assessment and then make sure that you are consistent. But the fact that you have this, standardized rubric already takes a lot of that guesswork, right? A lot of that subjectivity out of the evaluation process. So using the Evalu skills, you are able to measure change and measure growth. And there is, of course, access to all your student evaluations as an evaluator, but also as a program administrator, you will have access to, again, all your students' data and results and reports and averages. And you can run multiple reports from your end. You can use it as a pre and post also assessment. And you can also compare and see the areas of improvement, change, and growth, and so forth. So as I mentioned, evaluator, you will have created an account in the platform, and you will have great resources at your fingertips. You know, you will have the full instrument and then a list of skills, and there's also a report that gives you explanation for each of the different skill areas, and then explain what the different rubrics are for evaluation. And also as a participant, you will see who are your evaluators. Of course, you can either select your evaluators, or evaluators could be assigned. And as a participant, who could be a student or faculty member, if that's what you're using the assessment tool for, they can designate, and they can see the progress. There's also automated communications that could be set and sent as a program administrator, person who has access to setting up the instruments. So again, when we do the deep dive into value skills, I'll be happy to show the system features and how it works. But in terms of reporting capabilities, again, as with all of our assessment tools and offerings, you can get some great insight and information to use for your decision making, right? So there's a participant report, and participant report compares the participant's scores against the average of his or her evaluator's score. And also there's an average group score that they can see how they perform against. There's an action plan built into the participant's report. And then also there's a group report that you can run as a program administrator. And in the group report, you will see the average for self-evaluations of the participants. There's also average for the evaluator scores for the group, as well as information as to which individual students performed significantly higher or lower than the group average in each skill, so you can actually start working with those students, right? And this is a sample, an example of a participant report page, and it has the total average score across all competencies versus each competency's score, how it falls relative to the average, right? Above or below. So if you're doing above average, wonderful. If you're under, you want to dig a little deeper and see and understand what's going on or how you can improve the results. Speaking of which, in order to improve results, you can utilize the action plan. And it highlights the strengths of the individual students or participants can sustain. It also gives notes on weaknesses that could be improved. And then as part of the weaknesses, there is an entry where a participant can enter the mitigation steps, right? Activities they want to conduct in order to improve upon the results. They can also enter a person who will hold the participant accountable, because, you know, when we work with someone, when we have someone who can hold us accountable, we are able to do more and to achieve better results. And there's also a timeline, a deadline for when you would like to complete certain activities. So how do you apply, how do you use this value skills tool, right? For undergraduate students, you can use it as at the end of the academic program assessment, and you know, help the students with action plan, which they can use for further improvement. But I do agree that this tool is most appropriate and could be best utilized for postgraduate programs. With the students who are in a master's program or a doctoral program, especially, for example, for a doctoral program, right? A lot of the students are expected to teach And there, a lot of workplace readiness skills are required. So all throughout the program, they can use the Evalu skills as a guiding principle, right? Another resource and tool to work on improving their interpersonal skills. So in that case, you can conduct a pre-program assessment to really directly measure these workplace readiness competencies, put an action plan together from this pre-program assessment, and then use it throughout the program with the end result of offering the post-program assessment when they complete their degree. As I mentioned, you can use the Evalu skills as part of your staff and faculty development and tie it to your mission, vision, and value of your organization. So in conclusion, Evalu skills provides you with another flexible, customizable assessment instrument, and you will get the standardized rubrics for each of the assessment items, skills, and competencies to improve objectivity of the evaluation and consistency, right? And there is an admin site where you can manage the process very easily, very simply, and very intuitively, with a lot of automated features and announcements and reminders and setup built into the system. And then the group reports help you to determine what are the developmental needs for your program, for your learners, for your students. And then with the participant action plan, you are able to use it not only sustain the areas of strengths, but also you can work on improving the areas of weaknesses. And then as this ability to use as a pre and post test assessment with longitudinal analysis to directly measure change with your individual learners or participants allows you to use the data and results for your continuous improvement and also, again, address your accreditor's requirements. So this is my final poll question. And I really appreciate your active participation and responding to all my questions fully. And so here, if you could share with me, how can we help you now? What do you need from us? Specifically, I have mentioned, be happy to provide free access to our Assurance of Learning module, which you can share with your colleagues. I'll be happy to provide you with a free copy of our digital Assurance of Learning workbook. This contains a wealth of information that is relevant for many different Assurance of Learning requirements and continuous improvement processes. If you wanted to have a call to discuss further assessment related or Assurance of Learning or any of the quality assurance issues and implementation or areas, please do let me know. I'd be happy to set it up for you and for your teams. But if you wanted to just keep receiving more updates from Peregrine with solutions, with upcoming webinars, please do let me know, and I'd be happy to share that with you. All right. I wanted to give you a little more opportunity to make sure that I capture all of your responses. Thank you. Okay, so here, I know it's been a nice long workshop. And here's my email address, Jamian Soren, had a lovely, nice, long last name at peregrineglobal.com. And you probably all know Kayla and how to get hold of her. So feel free to reach out to us with your questions, requests for more information or additional clarification. I really appreciate you coming to participate in today's workshop. And let's open the floor for your questions. What kind of questions do you have for me?